The cardboard box weighed more than it should, not because of the objects inside, a mug, picture frames, dusty certificates, but because of the weight of 22 years being carried out of that building for the last time. Robert Miller was 50 years old, graying hair, and had just been fired, in front of the entire team, by a boss half his age. It all started on a Monday in August. Robert arrived at work as always, 7 in the morning, half an hour before everyone else. He was a senior developer at Tech Solutions, a software company in Austin, Texas, that he had helped build from when they were just 5 employees in a rented office in a cheap industrial park. 22 years. He had seen the company grow from a hungry startup to a corporation of 300 employees, had seen 3 different CEOs, survived 2 recessions, trained at least 50 junior developers who now earned more than him at other companies. But 6 months ago, everything began to change. Ryan Anderson was hired as the new Chief Technology Officer. 32 years old, MBA from an expensive American university, perfect teeth, always starched shirt, that kind of confidence that comes from never having truly failed because you never truly risked anything. In the first team meeting, Ryan made his vision clear. "We need to rejuvenate this department," he said, looking directly at Robert and 3 other developers over 45. "Technology evolves fast. Those who can't keep up get left behind." Robert felt the stab but said nothing. He would let his work speak for him as he always had. But Ryan had other plans. In the following weeks, Robert began to notice subtle changes. He was no longer included in important meetings. His suggestions in brainstorming sessions were ignored, or worse, represented by younger developers as if they were their own ideas. Projects he had led for years were silently transferred to others. Robert tried to talk to Ryan. He scheduled a one-on-one meeting. He arrived prepared with examples of his work, performance metrics, client praise. Ryan listened with that smile of someone who has already made a decision. "Robert, you are a valuable asset," he said with a voice that dripped falseness. "But maybe it's time to think about mentorship, about passing your knowledge to the new generation. Ever thought about reducing your workload? Maybe part-time." Part-time meant half the salary. Robert had 2 kids in college, a mortgaged apartment, his mother with Alzheimer's in a private care facility. He couldn't reduce anything. "Thank you for the suggestion," Robert replied, maintaining his composure. "But I prefer to continue full-time. I still have a lot to contribute." Ryan smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Of course. My door is always open." But it wasn't. The door was closing, slowly, methodically. 2 months later, Robert was assigned to a so-called legacy project, the kind of project nobody wants, maintaining old systems the company couldn't shut down, but also no longer invested in. It was professional exile. His colleagues began to treat him differently, some with pity, others with the discomfort of someone who knows they are witnessing a slow execution. The junior developers he had trained now barely made eye contact. Robert came home every day feeling invisible. His wife Claudia noticed. He was quieter, more tense. The kids asked if everything was okay at work. He lied and said yes. Then came that Monday in August. Robert arrived and found an email from Ryan. "Mandatory meeting, 9 o'clock, conference room." No agenda attached. When he entered the room, he saw he wasn't alone. 3 other senior developers were there, all over 45. And seated at the table were Ryan and 2 women from HR Robert had never seen before. Ryan wasted no time with preambles. "Tech Solutions is restructuring its technology department," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "As part of this restructuring, some positions are being eliminated. Unfortunately, your positions are among them." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of someone choking. One of the HR women, hair in a bun so tight it looked painful, began explaining the severance package. 3 months' salary, health plan maintained for 60 days, letter of recommendation available upon request. Robert heard everything as if he were underwater. The words arrived distorted, meaningless. 22 years, eliminated in a paragraph, read by a man who had worked there for 6 months. One of the other developers, Frank, 61 years old, his voice trembling, asked why. What was the criteria? "Our reviews were always excellent." Ryan smiled that corporate training smile. "It's a strategic decision based on the company's future direction. It's not personal." But it was. It was absolutely personal. It was about age. It was about high salaries. It was about getting rid of people who remembered how things used to be when the company valued loyalty and experience. "You have until the end of the day to collect your belongings," the HR woman continued. "Your system access will be revoked immediately. This is standard procedure." Robert felt a wave of humiliation burning his face. Standard procedure. As if they were criminals. As if 22 years of dedication deserved to be treated with the same coldness as firing an intern who stole pens. He stood up without saying a word. The others did the same. As they left, Robert heard Ryan say to the HR women, "Better this way, quick," like ripping off a Band-Aid. Back at his desk, Robert began to collect his things. Other employees watched from afar, some clearly embarrassed, others already returning to work, relieved it wasn't them. That's when Patricia appeared. She was a junior developer, 26 years old, and Robert had personally trained her over the last 2 years. She was talented, had a future. "Robert," she whispered, tears streaming, "this is so unfair. You don't deserve this." He forced a smile. "It's part of the business, Patricia. Life goes on." But before she could answer, Ryan appeared. "Patricia, don't you have work to do? Let Mr. Miller collect his things in peace." Patricia looked at Robert with an expression of helplessness and walked away. Ryan waited until she was out of earshot, then turned to Robert. "Just for the record, we won't take it badly if you sue. It's your right, but I should warn you our lawyers are very good, and termination due to restructuring is completely legal." Robert stopped packing his things and looked directly at Ryan. For the first time in months, he didn't look away. "I'm not going to sue," he said calmly. "It's not worth my time." Ryan blinked, surprised. "Great. Very mature of you." Robert picked up the box and started walking toward the exit. But he stopped and turned around. "Ryan, can I give you some advice?" The CTO crossed his arms, amused. "Sure. Never burn bridges you might need to cross back." Ryan laughed, a short, scornful laugh. "I think I'll be fine, Miller. But thanks for the concern." Robert didn't answer. He just left. Outside the building, under the relentless August sun, Robert placed the box in the trunk of his old Corolla. His hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from anger. A cold, calculated anger he hadn't felt in years. He was 50 years old. In a market that idolized youth, with a resume full of technologies many considered obsolete, with bills to pay and a family depending on him. But Robert Miller had something Ryan Anderson would never have: 22 years of real experience, deep knowledge not just of code, but of how complex systems really work, and contacts, lots of contacts. In the first days after the firing, Robert sank. He stayed in bed until late, didn't answer calls, avoided talking to Claudia about what he would do now. She was patient at first, but after a week, she sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Robert, you have 2 choices. You can drown in self-pity, or you can get up and show that kid the mistake he made." He looked at his wife. "What can I do? I'm 50 years old. Nobody hires 50-year-old programmers." "Then don't be a programmer," she replied. "Be something else. You have knowledge that half these startups would pay fortunes to have. Consulting, mentoring, I don't know, but do something." That conversation was the turning point. Robert got up, took a shower, made coffee, and opened his laptop. He started by making a list of all the contacts he had built over 22 years. There were many. Clients who loved his work, former colleagues who now held leadership positions in other companies, suppliers, partners. He started sending messages, not asking for a job but offering freelance consulting, complex problem-solving, code audits, team training. The first responses were polite rejections. "We're fine at the moment. Thanks for thinking of us." But then came a different response. It was from Paul Henderson, the former CEO of Tech Solutions, the man who had hired Robert 22 years ago. He had left the company 5 years earlier to found his own fintech startup. "Robert, I heard about your departure. What a waste. Are you available for a project? Pays well and is short-term, a month, maybe 2. Robert accepted immediately. The project was challenging, a payment system that was having problems that none of the younger developers on Paul's team could solve. Robert dove into the code, and in 3 weeks he not only fixed the problem but optimized the system so that processing time dropped by 60%. Paul was so impressed, he offered a permanent consulting contract, 20 hours a week, project-based pay, total flexibility. That was the first door that opened. Then came the second. Patricia, the junior developer Robert had trained, got in touch. She had left Tech Solutions 2 weeks after his firing. She got a job at a promising startup, and the CTO was looking for a senior consultant. Robert went to the interview. The CTO, a guy in his mid-30s, was direct. "I don't care about your age. I care if you can deliver. Show me what you know." Robert showed him. He was hired the same day. Within 3 months, Robert had 5 consulting clients. He was earning more than he had at Tech Solutions. He worked from home, chose his projects, had time for his family. And then the rumors started. Patricia sent a message. "Have you heard about Tech Solutions?" Robert hadn't. He was too busy working. "What? It's on fire here. After you and the others left, the legacy systems started failing. Nobody else knows how to maintain them. Ryan hired a bunch of junior developers, but they can't solve complex problems. And there's more. 3 major clients threatened to cancel contracts because the code quality dropped so much." Robert didn't reply, but he stored that information. 2 weeks later, he received another message, this time from Frank, one of the developers fired with him. "Robert, I need to tell you something. Remember that billing system you architected 10 years ago? Nobody else at Tech Solutions understands how it works, and it has critical bugs. The company is losing money, a lot of money." Robert remembered that system. It was complex, built in layers, with intricate business logic. He had documented everything, but documentation only takes you so far. You needed to understand the philosophy behind the architectural decisions, and that took years. A month later, in February, Robert was working from home when the phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" "Robert." The voice was hesitant, formal. "This is Sandra from HR at Tech Solutions." Robert felt a stab of satisfaction. "What can I do for you, Sandra? We'd like to speak with you about a possible consulting engagement. We have some systems that need attention from someone with your history." Robert smiled. "Consulting, not a job. Consulting, how interesting. Who's making the request?" "It's from Ryan himself, the Chief Technology Officer. Tell Ryan my consulting time costs $500 an hour, minimum of 20 hours per project, 50% payment up front." There was a shocked pause. $500 an hour. "That's the market rate for consultants with my experience," Robert replied calmly. "If it's too expensive, I'm sure you'll find someone cheaper. Good luck." He hung up before she could respond. Claudia, who had heard everything, asked, "Do you think they'll pay?" "I think they're desperate enough," Robert replied. And he was right. 3 days later, Sandra called again. "Ryan has accepted your terms. When can you start?" Robert let the silence stretch uncomfortably. "Let me check my schedule. I'm quite busy at the moment." Another pause. "It's urgent, Robert. The system is affecting billing. We're losing clients. I understand. I can fit you in next week. 3 hours a day for 5 days. Send the contract and the upfront payment." When Robert entered Tech Solutions for the first time in 6 months, the feeling was surreal. The building was the same, but he was different. No longer the disposable employee. Now he was the external consultant, the expert brought in to save the day. The receptionist, who used to greet him every day, blinked in surprise. "Mr. Miller, you're back?" "Technical visit," he replied with a smile. When he reached the IT department, he saw familiar faces. Some looked relieved to see him. Patricia ran up to him with a hug. "You're back." "Just passing through," he said. Then he saw Ryan coming out of his office. The CTO stopped suddenly, the color draining from his face. Robert walked over to him and extended his hand professionally. "Ryan, good to see you. Where can I set up my temporary workspace?" Ryan shook his hand, but Robert felt the dampness, the nervousness. "We have a conference room reserved for you. I appreciate you taking the project." Robert smiled. "It's work, and I always delivered good work." For the next 5 days, Robert dove into the broken billing system. As he suspected, the problem wasn't technical, it was conceptual. The junior developers had tried to make modifications without understanding the underlying architecture. Every fix created 2 new problems. Robert not only fixed the bugs, he documented everything in painstaking detail. Every decision, every line of code altered, every reason behind every choice. And he charged exactly what he promised, $500 an hour. On the last day, Ryan asked to speak with him privately. In the empty conference room, Ryan closed the door and stood, clearly uncomfortable. "Robert, I wanted to talk about your situation here." Robert leaned back in his chair, waiting. "What happened was unfortunate," Ryan continued. The restructuring was a board decision, you understand. But now I see it may have been premature. Robert said nothing. He let the silence do the work. What I'm trying to say is that we'd like to have you back. As an employee, we can discuss a salary increase, better benefits. Robert pretended to think. How much? Ryan mentioned a number. It was 30% above what Robert used to earn. Robert shook his head. No. Ryan blinked. No. You see, Ryan, you taught me a valuable lesson. You taught me that loyalty means nothing. That years of work can be discarded in a 10-minute meeting. So thank you for that. Ryan's face turned red. Robert, be reasonable. I am. I currently earn more as an independent consultant than I ever did here. I work fewer hours. I choose my clients. Why would I come back? Because you built this place. Tech Solutions was your home for 22 years. It was, Robert agreed, until you turned it into something else. And you know what I discovered in these 6 months? That I don't need a corporate home. I can build my own. Ryan looked desperate now. Robert, the system is still unstable. We need someone who understands the architecture. We can do another consulting contract, long-term. I can recommend someone, Robert said, standing up. Frank, one of the developers you fired with me, is available. He understands the systems as well as I do. Call him. Ryan turned pale. Frank sued us. You certainly gave me the right to do the same, Robert observed. But I chose not to waste my time. He didn't have the same patience. He left the room, leaving Ryan standing there, defeated. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, Patricia sent another message. You won't believe it. Ryan was fired. The board held him responsible for the client loss and the system instability. They're bringing Paul Henderson back as a restructuring consultant. Robert laughed. Paul was his first consulting client. The world goes round. A week later, Paul called him. Robert, I'm helping reorganize Tech Solutions. I need a favor. Would you consider coming back? Not as an employee, as a minority partner. 5% of the company, and you lead the restructuring of the technology department. Your way. With your team. Robert thought about Ryan, about all the discarded senior developers, about 22 years treated like trash. Then he thought about Patricia, about the juniors who really wanted to learn, about the systems he knew better than anyone how to fix. Under 3 conditions, he said. 1. I bring Frank and the others who were fired with me back as senior consultants. 2. We develop a real mentorship program, not that corporate checkbox nonsense. 3. We never discriminate against anyone because of age. Ever. Paul laughed. Deal. When can you start? Robert looked out the window of his home office. He saw Claudia in the garden, the kids home for the weekend, Rex, the new dog, sleeping in the sun. I can do 3 days a week, he replied. The rest of the time is mine. 3 months later, Robert was on stage at Tech Solutions, presenting the new structure of the technology department to the entire company. Frank was by his side, Patricia too, and 3 more of the developers who had been fired. In the audience, he saw young faces paying attention, and he didn't see Ryan, who was reportedly unemployed, having difficulty finding a new position after word spread about how he destroyed an entire department in 6 months. Robert didn't feel cruel satisfaction, just a calm recognition of how things work. You can discard experience, you can chase youth at any cost, but eventually, complex systems break. And when they break, you need someone who knows not just how to fix them, but why they were built that way in the first place. 1 year after the firing, Robert was earning triple what he did before. He had flexible hours, he worked on projects that challenged him. And he trained the next generation, but now the right way, with mutual respect, with the recognition that youth and experience are not adversaries, they are complements. And when new junior developers asked how to deal with toxic bosses or companies that don't value their work, Robert always gave the same advice. Never let anyone define your worth, especially not someone who doesn't have the capacity to see it. And remember, systems are complex, but people are more so. Whoever treats people as disposable parts will eventually discover they've built a machine that doesn't work without them. 3 years later, Tech Solutions was back on top. The clients who had threatened to leave renewed their contracts. New projects came in constantly, and Robert, now with 5% of the company and an active voice in strategic decisions, ensured that what happened to him would not happen again. He implemented clear policies against age discrimination, created career paths that valued both potential and experience, established mentorship programs where seniors and juniors worked side by side, learning from each other. And when the company reached record profits, Robert made sure bonuses were distributed fairly, not just to executives. As for Ryan, Robert heard over the years that he jumped from startup to startup, always lasting less than a year, always leaving a trail of broken teams and broken systems. Eventually, his reputation caught up with him. Today, he works as an IT manager at a small company, earning a quarter of what he did at Tech Solutions. Robert doesn't feel pity, just a distant sadness for a man who had so much potential but wasted it all chasing the wrong metrics. In his office, Robert keeps a photo. It's not of his family, although he has many. It's of the cardboard box he carried out of Tech Solutions that day in August. A reminder. A reminder that the worst day of your life can be the first day of your new life. A reminder that when they burn the bridge you're on, sometimes the universe is just forcing you to build a better one. And a reminder that revenge doesn't have to be cruel. Sometimes the best revenge is simply proving they were wrong, and then moving on, building something better than they could ever imagine. Robert is 53 now, and he finally understands that age is not decline, it is accumulation. Of knowledge, of wisdom, of contacts, of stories, of scars that became lessons. And when young developers come to him, desperate, unfairly fired, lost, he always says the same thing. This is not the end. It's the beginning. Use the anger as fuel, not as poison. Build something they never could. And when they come on their knees, and they will, you decide whether to help them or not. But you decide from the top, not the bottom. Because that's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is bitter. It keeps you stuck in the past. Justice is sweet. And it frees you for the future. And if this story of professional turnaround inspired you, leave your like now and subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find real stories of people who turned their biggest defeats into their greatest victories. Stories of revenge, karma, and justice that will make you think twice before underestimating someone. Turn on the bell, because every week there's a new story of an epic turnaround. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated at work? How did you react? Share your story. We read all the comments, and who knows, your story might be our next video. Until next time.